I would once again request you all to welcome all the august panelists that we have here, and request Ali to please deliver his keynote address. Thank you.
Namaste. Hello, everyone. How are you? Thank you for joining us in this great conversation about the logistics, tracking, supply chain, all within the realm of the Internet of Things. My hope today is to kind of give you guys a little bit of historical insight on tracking and logistics, what the few meanings that you're starting to see that are buzzwords that are floating around there within the IoT space in regards to the tracking and logistics, and kind of explain my future projections and predictions on where I believe tracking and locating and supply chain will end up being. So to set the stage, IoT in India is expected to have a market potential of 15 billion by 2020. This is something that has fluctuated. It was 9 billion, and they've changed the numbers now. So you can see that in India, IoT is really starting to pick up, and there's an extreme amount of opportunity there within several different verticals across the IoT space. And one of them, that's one of the leading opportunities, is actually the logistics and supply chain. In India's logistics market, this doesn't include IoT, this is just the overall logistics market, you are seeing an expected 215 billion US dollars by 2020. That's a massive amount of money that's being invested into the logistics market space within the India. By 2020, we've seen that the IoT in logistics is becoming one of the highest adoption levels in India. Some of the other verticals like healthcare are a little bit slower to take on IoT, but IoT is actually a very perfect situation that can address a lot of the challenges that people are seeing within the end-to-end supply chain and logistics. So here is some estimated spending on the connected logistics solutions by BI Intelligence. And you can see that it's around 20 billion US dollars by 2020. So I put all these numbers out there because, one, I know people love to see it. And two, I just wanted to drive in the fact that in India there is a lot of opportunity, and I strongly recommend, if you guys are considering into developing solutions for IoT, this might be an actual really good market for you to look into. So what is industrial IoT? This terminology has been floated around probably about 2 years ago. IoT was obviously the first thing, Internet of Things. Everyone says, oh, that's great, what's Internet of Things? Internet of Things itself is everything that's connected and communicating to the Internet wirelessly, not just on the industrial side, but consumer side, healthcare, agriculture, everything. So industrial IoT is actually something that brings it down into a little bit more specifics, focused in on the manufacturing side. So when you hear this term IoT, which has been floating around, that's basically what it involves in. Then there's a new word that came out, Industry 4.0. If you all have started to hear this terminology, this is now taking manufacturing to the next level. So IoT, IIoT in manufacturing is taking sensors and devices and communicating them wirelessly. If it's a tracking sensor on a cargo or something that's tracking a location directly in the warehouse, something that's sensing and sending information that reduces your time to market and production. What 4.0 industry is, something a little bit more than just the Internet of Things. It's now bringing in the computing power of the cloud, taking cyber physical systems and really bringing everything together in this one 4.0 system. It's, as you can see on this timeline, Industry 1.0 was really the beginning of the steam-powered engines and things that were pushing the manufacturing all the way back in 1784. And as time has progressed, the efficiencies in manufacturing and in logistics has improved. Industry 2.0 was talking about mass production, assembly lines, and that was in the 1870. Industry 3.0 automation. Now you have computers that are actually processing it, but typically it's a localized instance of some machine that's sitting in the warehouse that's processing all of this information. And that was in the 1969. My father's actually an electric engineer, and he's been doing wireless communications for over 30 years. He's like, oh, the IoT is just a coined term. It's just a new thing. But we've been doing this with microwaves many, many years ago. And this is kind of when that Industry 3.0 was. But what my father lacks to realize is that back then you didn't have the computing power. You didn't have the cloud capabilities that you have now in today's industry. And that's where really 4.0 is. It's not just wireless sensing. It is a lot more about that. It's sense making. So I put some definitions on there that I got off of Wikipedia. You can actually look it up. But I figured a little bit of verbiage to explain what the 4.0 meaning is up there for you. I won't read it. So this is what we're seeing now is logistics 4.0. This is just on the cusp. Right, so I've walked you through IoT to IIoT to the 4.0 processes within the industry. Now we're talking about logistics 4.0, and it's happening now, and it's happening in a year from now, and the following years to come. And this is really the core discussions where I think we'll start to see from the panel discussions on how this is all going to progress. There's so much going on in logistics today in the supply chain. And taking IoT, taking computing power, and bringing it all into one complete end-to-end supply chain solution is something that we're going to see in the future. How fast can you get a delivery to a customer? How fast can you get something off the production line? How are you sending this information, and how long can you send this information? Those are all things that are being looked into, from connected production floor to tracking your employees, and not necessarily from a security personal perspective, but more from a safety perspective. You know, in some of these manufacturing sites, they have some really heavy equipment that should not be turned on if there's an employee actually residing in those areas. And so being able to monitor your employees from a positioning perspective right when your line's about to turn on this big equipment that could hurt them is something very important to know. Also, there are things out there that are looking for the health of the person. You know, they under high stress. There's sensors that are being attached to people's bodies that can tell their heart rate. Are they becoming dehydrated? Those are sensing mechanisms that kind of play in the lines of healthcare solutions, but is being used in the manufacturing facilities or look to be used there. Then we look at physical security, things about security of the actual assets that you have. Are they breaking into boxes? Has someone opened a box? The security of your employees when they're entering and exiting the building. Also, just the building itself. Has someone tried to break in overnight? How do you notify them? So there's security systems out there, but how are they doing it then versus doing it now with the IoT, the Internet of Things, the sensors? Those are things that we will see advance as time continues. So I was actually in a terminal operator conference in Dubai a few years ago. It's quite interesting. We have a big wealth of knowledge of people here from different parts within this entire process, but we still miss the terminal, the port authority opinions that I continue to go to IoT events and they never show up. So I took myself to a terminal operator conference just to see what's going on there. And everyone in the industry, from ports authorities to people that were building equipment for the cargo lifting off of a ship and placing it onto the actual docks, were there that serviced any part of the world. And you'd be surprised how much IoT was lacking. Anything from how do you control the lighting on a port. Lighting is very important for the safety of the people there because they've got these big tons of cargo that's being moved around. And so I asked people, well, how are you guys addressing your lighting situations now? And you know, you had your Philips there, you had all these guys that had these really bright LED lights, but there was no sensing, no IoT solutions really there. There was some Wi-Fi, but it had limitations on its range. So people were actually running wires all through the port. And you could talk about you're trying to improve safety for people, but you're creating more hazards as you're putting out these solutions. So I would love to see in the future some more port authority, some people from the Terminal Operator Conference to contribute to this discussion. Because if you look at an end-to-end logistics, if someone's sending a product over via ocean to a different location, the actions to get that onto the boat and then get off the boat are just as important, especially for sending something to Korea versus India. And I think one of our speakers here today might have something to speak on that. So asset tracking is really big. We're seeing that not just in logistics also, but that's probably where the biggest driving factor is in all the statistics I showed you earlier. We, at our booth, SenRa, we're a low-power wide area network provider for the wireless communication, so we set up the infrastructure. But we do collaborate with partners that have actual tracking sensors, devices that are communicating long range using our technology, and we have it displayed at our exhibit floor. But these trackers are actually being installed on containers, on trucks. There's some that are actually tags that the employee would put around their collar. And so the tracking is a big piece. There is some discussion about security, some resistance on, well, is that crossing the line on privacy? And I think those are some things that should be discussed. But at the end of the day, safety, if you're investing tons and tons of money on assets, very high valued items, I think you'd like to know where it's being taken when it leaves your floor or your warehouse. So that leads into then traffic and fleet management. Where are your cargo? Where is your product going? Where are the drivers going? How do you track the vehicle? When the vehicle's in motion, how do you know that they're going the best route possible to get there at the quickest time? How do you do route optimization? Has the cargo been opened? How do you track the temperature of the cargo if you have something that could actually degrade over time in heat, high temperature situations, which is something in India can get pretty hot over the summertime. So we have cold chain solutions that we can also add, and it wirelessly communicates while that truck is going down to let you know, hey, something's broken in the refrigeration and you probably should pull over and get it serviced or you'll lose your product. So that's something that's being done as well. Connected retail, this is something that's coming. And it's starting to happen, but how does the consumer receive the product? How are they connected to your actual tracking systems? How do they know when something got shipped in the Korea versus India? These are things that people are trying to bring to the consumer base. So we talk about B2B, and now B2C is also very important in the logistics process. And that's also some topics that will be discussed today. So wrapping all of this up, customer recognition is something that you're going to start to see in Logistics 4.0, fingerprint, retinal scanning, because in the future, which you'll see in a few slides, drones are starting to be used to deliver packages. So when a drone delivers a package to you, how does the drone know that that's you? So you're looking at technologies that are trying to understand the customer from a recognition perspective using biometrics. And then resource and energy monitoring. In the manufacturing site, how do you manage your energy consumption? How do you improve it so that your bills aren't so high, that you are actually doing things appropriately from the use of gas? And so there's a plethora of technologies and solutions out there to address those that are being done in smart cities as well, in the building, smart building management facilities. And those same solutions are being used in logistics. So what do I see in the future is autonomous IoT. This is something that's really going to take to the next level, probably in 5 to 10 years, I think, my guess. I could be a little off, but it's coming, and there's stuff that's already out there. And a good example is Hyperloop, if you all are familiar with this. I was in Dubai at an IoT conference, and Hyperloop was there, and the king of UAE was there, and he made this big announcement that they're building an entire pipe system from certain ports to certain facilities, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away. And that's all for logistics. It's not for transportation of humans or people, but their products. So they're looking to actually take these big cargo containers, stick them in the Hyperloop tubes, and shoot them across miles and miles and miles of desert terrain where it's just impossible and very resource constrained on their vehicles to get there, and all through this Hyperloop. So they're investing a lot of money there. There's also some initiatives in India that I've seen that they're doing some testing right now with the Hyperloop technology. So I think that's something interesting to look at. What also I just mentioned earlier was drones. DHL, Amazon, all these big players within the logistics from the B2C are really looking into this seriously and finding out how can they use drones to actually take packages to the consumer. There is some regulations that you have to abide by from air traffic control, and in the US there's actually privacy issues. There's laws where a US person can actually submit a complaint to the appropriate authorities and make their property a no-fly zone. So what happens is these drones, the quickest way would be straight over 5 homes, but now it has to find a way to redirect itself because there's one guy that says you don't fly anything over my home. So those are some challenges that you're seeing in the United States. I'm not 100% sure on if those are the same issues in India, but you do need to understand there is some hurdles there, which I think we'll get to, and especially traffic in Delhi and Bangalore, in some of these high populated areas. This is quicker to get your package. So it is something that's really interesting to me, and I'd love to see how it progresses. And autonomous vehicles. I was in Germany for a conference there at CeBIT. And they had autonomous vehicles that were transporting people from the parking lots to the actual venue, and there was no driver. So how do you take that technology that's there and bring it into logistics? Now, I'm not saying that you're going to see these driving down the main roads in Delhi, especially in the high traffic areas where the normal rules of the road don't, it's probably hard to generate an algorithm for that, but think about the autonomous vehicles in the actual ports, in the warehouse facilities, in large acres where you have the forklift actually driving itself and lifting things. You don't have an operator there that needs to do that. So those are things that we are seeing. So I'm really interested to see how this discussion goes, and I hope this has helped you all understand a little bit about where we are today, where we were, and where we will be going in the logistics, and I appreciate your time to give me the opportunity to talk. Thank you.